Don't release a game with poor visuals, poor performance, and riddled with bugs. Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and I've got an itch, and it needs scratching. That itch is disappointment with Scarlet and Violet, and itching it is making this video where I talk about how I'd fix it. Despite what I said in the teaser, I'm not going to be focusing on performance and visuals because, well, for one thing, that's obvious. So instead, I'm going to be focusing more on the gameplay side, and very specifically, the open world side, because it's less technical for one thing than saying, Thundershock should be 35 damage. I've been playing a lot of other open world games over the weekend and kind of researching, delving in, trying to work out what makes them work and what makes Scarlet and Violet, at least for me, not work as an open world game. And if anyone's in any doubt as to whether a lot of my points are going to be at least partially in reference to Breath of the Wild, a lot of my points are going to be at least partially in reference to Breath of the Wild. It's almost like it's one of the most critically successful open world games ever released. I mean, but anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. In an open world where exploration is the main drive, it's important to give the player the agency to reach a wide variety of different locales. This sort of happens in Scarlet and Violet, but you're largely discouraged from going north at the very least due to the giant crater that is Area Zero. By plonking the player in an area that has intrigue regardless of direction, you allow them to forge their own path and ultimately their own adventure. Pokémon has always tried to push this idea of having your own bespoke adventure with things like, you know, your party Pokémon, what you choose to have in there, and this would just be another element to really emphasize that. Don't lock required movement abilities behind progress. All it does is artificially restrict the player's exploration possibilities. That doesn't mean that players should be actively encouraged to go literally wherever they want, as that can upset the flow of the game, something that is already an extremely difficult thing to balance in open world titles. Instead, the game can use soft gates, things like really high-level Pokémon that are defeatable, but it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of thinking, or obstacles that are difficult but possible to overcome, but then get easier as you get some sort of upgrade in the future. This will let less experienced or more cautious players know that they're likely not equipped to be here, but also signal to more daring players that whilst you probably shouldn't push further, you're more than welcome to try. The sense of scale is important in giving the players the feeling that they are in a truly gigantic world. Seeing landmarks and points of interest from great distances is only possible with gradual, more sweeping landscapes, even if they aren't that accurate to real life. This can be further amplified by having the camera just slightly higher up, allowing the player to see more than their in-game character would be able to. Give players the chance to see something in the distance and want to explore it, rather than just feeling sort of trapped in a locale. Not strictly an open world mechanic, but it does kind of play into the way that the open world is experienced. In Scarlet and Violet, the player is merely an agent for the Pokémon they catch, and is essentially absent from any meaningful interactions, partly due to their silent nature. Giving the player health like in Legends Arceus makes the player feel as though they themselves have a genuine presence in the world. While Pokémon should try to attack you personally rather than simply forcing a battle with whatever you've already caught. This means that having no healthy Pokémon doesn't result in a whiteout, rather losing all your health does, encouraging a wider variety of playstyles depending on the surrounding monsters. This can be fraught with its own problems, of course, one of which is players simply damage boosting through powerful foes to reach high value rewards, but this can be mitigated by making player health recover gradually or limiting your movement when quote-unquote injured. The Pokédex tells us that some of these monsters can level mountains or melt rock, so give the players a reason to fear them. Trainers won't interrupt you in Scarlet and Violet, but many small Pokémon are almost impossible to see due to their diminutive stature, or if they just haven't loaded in yet. It's all too simple to just run into one and be locked into a tedious battle that's just too easy. The player should always be the one to decide if a wild encounter turns into a battle. Have smaller, weaker Pokémon, or just sort of friendlier Pokémon, actively run away or just try and get out of the way of the player. They're wild animals at the end of the day. More powerful or aggressive monsters should attack the player directly if they feel threatened, knocking them off their mount and forcing the player to decide whether to engage or run as best they can. It makes so little sense for so many man-made items to just be on the ground, at least in a lore sense, and even in a mechanical sense, it makes it too easy, and also just makes the world feel kind of like it's full of litter. Instead, have more natural environmental items such as herbs, plants, berries, and other natural resources that players can use in order to heal their Pokémon. Legends Arceus did something similar, but locked it behind a crafting mechanic that merely added a step to things, but the idea is sound. The flora should also be visible from a distance rather than inexplicable sparkles on the ground. Players should be able to spot something from a distance and think, ah, green leaves with faint yellow stripes, I can use that to heal my Pokémon, and in turn give them the agency and an admittedly piecemeal objective to reach organically. Crafting or processing could potentially be used to improve the potency of a plant's healing properties if required, allowing more health or status effects to be healed in a single interaction rather than requiring multiple doses. A healing herb and a healing mushroom could be combined into an amalgam that is more potent than the sum of its parts. It's a lot like the cooking mechanic in Breath of the Wild. Man-made items should still be present, but significantly rarer, and most commonly, broken. Broken TMs, Pokeballs, lures, everything like that, they could all be repairable for a nominal fee, or using your own expertise. The latter of which could even be an optional upgrade to the player's skill set. Just from a world-building point of view, you don't tend to find, entire, intact, completely usable bottles of medicine when you're just roaming around the countryside or a city. It just doesn't make any sense. Trainers just hang around strangely waiting for someone to battle them, and when you do engage with them, it's often barely different from a wild encounter. Trainer battles would be far more interesting if there were fewer of them and their party was of a greater size. Give each trainer a pool of Pokémon to pull from, and take the player's gym badges and highest level Pokémon in their party into account when pulling from the pools somewhat randomly. This should also be used to determine each Pokemon's level within a certain range. Whilst it makes no logical sense for a trainer, particularly in an earlier part of the game, to randomly and magically match your Pokemon's power level, particularly if you've been off training for dozens of hours, nor does the strict leveling system. It's just a mechanic that provides an illusion to help the gameplay flow. However, this can in turn run the risk of presenting inexperienced players with too much of a challenge. If a player takes on a trainer and loses, then trains up further to take them down, only for the opponent to suddenly match their improved Pokémon, they're likely to feel cheated and as though their grinding was for nothing. This can be worked around by locking an enemy trainer's party once it is generated, or the player increases their number of gym badges as a distinct marker of progress. An open world is no fun if the difficulty can't adjust itself in order to keep the push-pull balance in order throughout. You'll see this in practically every other open world game. For example, in Breath of the Wild, Bokoblins will rank up and become different colors, and the same with Moblins, Lizalfos, and all that sort of thing. Scaling wild Pokemon is something to absolutely keep in mind, although some areas should naturally have weaker monsters than others so that the scaling can be hidden to a degree. Perhaps using too strong a Pokemon to take out too many weaklings can cause an enraged parent Pokemon, or even just a related Pokemon that empathizes with them, to suddenly spawn and attack you, the player, because of what you're doing. This would give an immediate spike of difficulty for more advanced players in an early area, providing a bit more texture and a bit more fun. And it's only triggered by your brutish actions. But far, far more importantly, gyms absolutely need to be scaled. Using the same system that I mentioned for trainer battles, they should pull from a pool of available Pokemon at semi-random, using the player's total number of gym badges and highest level Pokemon as values to determine the eventual leader's party, with a small degree of randomness to thrown in just to keep things exciting. And again, the levels should also be balanced accordingly. And just like trainer battles, once the gym leader's party has been decided, it should be locked until the player acquires more gym badges from elsewhere or defeats the gym leader. This could even be easily explained in the lore, as gym leaders consider your number of badges and select a party befitting of your current rank.
This has even been addressed in official media, you know, the miniseries Pokémon Origins. Brock does it.
Exploration is made infinitely more enjoyable if the mere act of moving around is fun. Giving the player the desire to use the landscape to change and accelerate or improve how they explore will help the player become more familiar and more invested in the world. Examples include using steep slopes to slide down and ramps to launch from, tall vertical structures that can be climbed and jumped from to provide greater airtime, and a moveset and toolkit that allows for multiple methods of traversal. This feeling can then be heightened in specific sections where this freedom is taken away from the player, like the slippery shrine walls in Breath of the Wild.
Not quite done yet, also want to do some quickfire ones, but before I do, why don't you leave a comment down below letting us know how you would change something about Scarlet and Violet's open world, and let's see whether some of those come up in the quickfire round. Change the camera's position. I mean, you can either see the landscape ahead of you, or you can see the Pokemon below you. You can't ever see both. The camera's kind of too high up and just angled weirdly. It just doesn't work, and going downstairs is even worse. Just let us catch Pokemon by throwing balls like in Arceus. I know, I don't want to just say, oh, you should just make Arceus, but my god, you know, they've streamlined the battling of Pokemon with the Let's Go system, so just let us streamline catching Pokemon as well. There's so many of the buggers. Think about the purpose of towns and villages before making them. One of the early areas, there's literally a town or village or whatever that is just literally 4 houses, and you can't go in any of them. What's the point? Voice acting! I mean, obviously, the cutscenes are all awkward as hell, and there's too much dialogue. Anyway, voice acting would make that a little bit easier. Maybe. Have stat changes happen in a fraction of the time. Absolutely not an open world mechanic, but it just annoys me to no end. Just, you know, have a pling and, you know, like just a very split second, just a particle effect to show that a stat's going up, and then list the stats that have gone up. You know, attack raised sharply, defense raised, you know, all in one thing. It doesn't need to be blip, 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 blip. 1, blip, 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 blip. 2, and then do like a blob for bad things. And for the love of God, can I customize my character a bit more? 4 outfits. I know there are accessories, but it's not enough. 4 outfits in the whole game, and they're all school uniforms. You know what? You know, sod it, just let me... Why do I always have to play as a child? Let me play as an adult. I am an adult. I want a beard. Sword and Shield threw you outfits left, right, and center. You got one for defeating every gym. And yeah, they were kind of weird, but it just let you, just like, hey, do you want to wear this? Yes. Why? You know, customization. This shouldn't even be a complaint, my God. And there you have it. Got a little bit ranty at the end, but I am so disappointed with this game. There's good in there. There is good in there, but it is so swamped by so much that I just feel could be so easily fixed. You know, I didn't even touch on the glitches in this, because that's just obvious. Just fix the glitches. Some of them are truly spectacular. Did you know you can move more quickly by having 2 controllers connected? It has to be undocked, but like the Joy-Con attached to the Switch and the Pro Controller, another pair of Joy-Con, if you move diagonally on both of them, you move faster. How did that get through? But what are your thoughts? We'd love to hear them. Have you been enjoying the game regardless, or do you have your own complaints and your own suggestions for how things could be fixed? Let us know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you compare that subscribe button to Breath of the Wild, because it's successful and critically acclaimed for a very good reason. And be sure to check out nintendolife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.